I want to talk about union with Christ. It's a doctrine that has very thick textbooks. If you do an Amazon search for books on union with Christ, union with Christ is a doctrine that is very veiled. It is something that God does not reveal to everyone in the sense that it really affects how they live their life and how they walk. Union with Christ means that you, in some sense, have died 2,000 years ago on Calvary's Hill. Let's say it in a way that's a little scarier. I, Nate, died on the cross of Calvary. I, Nate, was buried in Joseph of Arimathea's tomb. I, Nate, was raised on the third day. I, Nate, ascended into heaven. I, Nate, am seated at the right hand of God the Father. These are things that union with Christ really means. These are the implications. Now, a more accurate way of saying that would be, I died with Christ on the cross of Calvary. I was buried with Christ in Joseph of Arimathea's tomb. I was raised with Christ on the third day when Christ was raised. And I ascended to God's house in heaven, in Galilee with Christ. And I'm seated with Christ at the right hand of God. Now, here's where it gets tricky. What you are no longer exists. You see, the life that you had up to the moment you were converted has all gone to the cross. Not just your sin, but who you are, your personality. And so you, in your true act of worship, shouldn't just sing songs. That is the biggest misnomer in all of Christianity, that singing songs equals worship. No, throughout the Old and New Testament, the big theme of God and how to worship God acceptably is that you yield yourself. You give up your whole heart and your whole life, and you give God what you are in reverence. You see this in Romans chapter 12, where Paul says your spiritual act of worship is to present your body as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable, which is your spiritual act of worship. So if our job is just to yield ourselves to God, what this is intended to accomplish is that the cross of Christ should wither away the remaining parts of your flesh. You see this in Romans chapter 8. It says, if you live according to the flesh, that is your old nature, your dead nature, the thing that was crucified, if you sow to that, you will die. And it says that if you sow to the Spirit, you will live. So you have a choice. You can sow to the life that Christ has deposited in you, and you can live. Or you can sow to the flesh and die. In Colossians chapter 3, it says, if then you have died, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. And it says in Colossians 2, why, as though living in the world, do you submit to regulations? Do not handle, do not taste, do not touch. He's responding to people who are ascetics. They make the monks of Roman Catholicism look pathetic with how ascetic they are. They refuse to handle certain foods. They don't allow marriage. They don't allow pleasures in this world. And Paul is saying, why, as though you even exist here? Why do you pretend like this is real? This is simply a place for God to dwell. And you are to steward this and return it to God on the day of judgment. This is just a place for God to live. This is not, my name is Nate. This is not really Nate. This is a temple of Yahweh. This is a place for God to live through me. And if you're not doing that, by the way, either you're not a Christian or you're in big trouble. Because the life that Christ intends to live through you is just like the life he lived in his body on the earth. And that's why he says in the Gospel of John that it is better for him to go away. Not simply so that you could commune with Christ spiritually in a deeper way than you could in person. Certainly that is included. But it's also better for Christ to have gone away, because literally everything that's displeasing to God not only legally dies in justification when you trust Christ by faith, but he begins to work that new life in you, which is really his life. It's really his power, his grace, his character. And that's the whole point of the Christian life, to let your humanness, or as the Bible calls it, your earthliness, let what is earthly in you be put to death, and the spiritual graces of God and Christ can be renewed in you. This comes through union with Christ. This comes by the power of the Holy Spirit in you, displacing you and putting Christ in your place. So that John even says, what we will be is not yet seen. It is a mystery what exactly we will be. But if I could give a commendation, study the book of Romans, study Paul's works. He has a lot to say about how you have died and Christ is the only thing that lives.